So if we were to look at an administrator dashboard from the if we were to look at a worker dashboard, we could, as an administrator, you've got the ability to switch to, which is a really, really useful function. So if you were to go to worker, and we could look at this one here, perhaps, self-bill, Linda Tesley. We would go switch to. And by doing that, you can see exactly what your contractor can see. So this is a contractor's portal on InTime Core. So this is, if they were to log in, this is kind of the view that they would have. And on here, you can see everything from my details. So obviously, you can see the name, the reference, the work type, the address, and any placements they're working on. There's no limit on the amount of placements that a particular contractor is working on. So in this example, it's only one, but you might find perhaps if there was a recruitment agency that are working with teachers, perhaps they might be doing a maths lesson in the morning, an English lesson in the afternoon, or then working in a different school the next day, perhaps. So there's no limit on the amount of placements they can have. Following on from that, any recent purchase invoices and credits would obviously be stored there, and any recent timesheets. So for a contractor to log in, and submit their timesheets, you've got a couple of options depending on how the placement is set up. And instead of clicking into all of these and talking through it, I've just taken a few screenshots. So for example, if I full screen that, just kind of save a bit of time. So here, for example, we've got an hourly timesheet. So your contractor could log in and they might find they're only working 7, 8 hours a day or whatever it is. They might be part-time. They might only be working 3, for example, for 5 days a week. So they'd only want to submit an hourly timesheet. Failing that, they can also submit time and hours. So this one here, for example, they started at 9 o'clock, they had an hour break, and then they finished at 6 o'clock, for example. One other important thing to put, I know obviously this is a screenshot, but in rates, you can add as many rates as you want. So you might have perhaps, this one here is a basic rate, but you could have an overtime rate. You could have, in the teaching example, if they're at the same school, but perhaps doing a slightly different job, you might have a higher rate. For example, maths teachers could be on a higher rate than perhaps an RS teacher, for example, which is all possible here. So they could obviously monitor the time and dates they're working and obviously select the rate. At worker level, you're also able to, this is something that not all agencies have, but if you were working with a purchase order and you wanted the contractor to obviously log that against their timesheet, you could obviously do that. So, for example, a purchase order reference might be PO10, for example. And if you were to tell your contractor that, whenever they submit time against that particular client, they could log the purchase order. But again, this can all be hidden and configured to the agency spec. And again, they can also add any comments. I'm not too sure what an example of a comment would be from a contractor. Perhaps they might have finished a little bit early, but worked later the day before, so have taken that into account for the rates. I'm not too sure, but they can add. They've obviously got the ability to add custom text there. So that's time and hours. You've also got decimal. So perhaps you might find an agency or a contractor might have a preference for just going in and logging 9.5 units if they're on an hourly rate, obviously. And again, you've got the purchase order option and the comments option. Again, I know obviously this is a screenshot, so I can't show you, but if they were doing the same hours on a daily basis, or in this case, the same units, they've got a copy and paste button there. So they can literally just copy and paste the units all the way to the bottom. And finally, if you've got a contractor who's perhaps on a day rate and them rates are exactly the same every single day they work, it might be whatever the value is, they could just come in and click units. So this is obviously a tick box setup, and they could just come in, click, 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 and then that is all sorted. In terms of sending it off to the approving manager or sending it off, for example, if I was to show you this one here, for example. So this is our demo environment, and this is a timesheet for Linda Tesley, for example, who's got time and hours. So perhaps they might start at 9 o'clock in the morning, they might have an hour for lunch, and then they might finish at 6 in the evening. If they was to copy and paste that for every single week, for every single day, for example, here's the kind of options that I wasn't able to show you on the last screen. So obviously they're screenshots, but you've got the ability to save it as a draft. You can save and submit it, which obviously means it would go off for approval. And perhaps even you're doing the same hours week on week. So this particular contractor might just want to copy from previous. Again, which is an option. Again, one thing that's worth knowing is InTime Core can facilitate obviously paper timesheets. So perhaps you might have a client or a contractor who's still getting paper timesheets submitted. They're using InTime. The paper timesheet has been signed, and they want to kind of upload that into InTime as kind of a bit of supplementary evidence to say that their time and hours has been approved. Again, that's something that's completely capable of. Right at the bottom, this kind of shows you a breakdown of this particular worker's pay. So overtime, hourly. Yeah, you'd obviously get a clear breakdown here. The only other thing that I don't think I've mentioned at this stage is approval routes. There's 3 main approval routes for InTime. So you can get a client manager, so a manager at the client site. They would obviously get a notification once the worker has submitted time and hours. You've also got a consultant approval route, so exactly the same way, but it could be a recruitment consultant working at the agency. They would then have the ability to log in and submit an approved time and hours from a particular contractor. And finally, you've also got auto approval. So if there's a particular contractor who you trust and he's been very reliable in obviously during the past, he can just approve his own timesheet, for example. So this one here is set up for manager approval. So if I was to save and submit that, this would go forward to approval. So you'd get a notification to say submitted, and this would go off to a manager. So in this example, it would be Manuel Testerton, and that would obviously sit for them for approval. Another thing I should also make you aware of with the worker dashboard, they've obviously got the bell, and this is a familiar theme that appears in all screens in InTime, and this gives you brief notifications for various different things. So in this example, a timesheet has been rejected by a manager, and I think that was something that I did last week actually, and I put a comment on there that said Linda did not work Monday, for example, and then obviously the process starts again. In the same way you'd create a timesheet, if you were to have an expense, you would obviously have to configure that at placement level. But this one here, for example, if a contractor was to come in and submit an expense, you can add as many options as you want. So here we've got mileage, train receipt, and expense. Expense I've just put in there for like generic stuff. So if it was perhaps like an ad hoc, maybe like a hotel bill, or yeah, I'm not too sure, or like a food bill, for example, that can obviously be uploaded there. Train receipt and mileage. So for example, the mileage is a really good one. So it might be, in this example, it's 45 pence per mile. So if you were to do 10 miles, for example, InTime would automatically, 42 pence per mile. So InTime would automatically calculate that, and that would obviously be showed up there. Description, you might have petrol for a meeting in London meeting, whatever. So you've obviously then got the ability to add text as you go along. So you've obviously got a reference of what it is you're submitting expenses for. If you would submit receipts, you could also do that in InTime. So, for example, petrol for London. I know with our company, you have to have a petrol receipt to match the VAT of that particular expense. And InTime, you can do that. So if you were to have, a petrol receipt from BP, you could obviously upload that into InTime, and that would obviously be there supporting evidence for the approval manager. Again, that would have the exact same approval route as your timesheet, so that could go to consultant, auto approval, or it could go to manager. Again, you've obviously got their paper upload if your expenses were being managed manually via paper, for example. So that's kind of it for what a contractor can see and do. Yeah, so obviously at this stage that would be sent off for the approving manager. And if I was to show you what that would look like, we could go here to managers, and Manuel Testerton was the one that was chosen. And if we were to switch to there, so this is the view that a manager would have if they were to log into InTime. So it really clear. I think we've spent a lot of time and work over the last couple of years to make InTime as self-sufficient as possible, so it's as user-friendly as possible. So in this example, you've got any timesheets that are unauthorised, any expenses. If we were to look at unauthorised expenses, timesheet, we could see the one there that we've just submitted for Linda. If we were to click on ID, we could view it. So this would kind of give you a really clear breakdown of everything that's going on with the time and hours that she's submitted. Obviously a manager, if it wasn't already and it needed to be linked against purchase order, I think there's one under CL, you can link it to a purchase order. Here we go. So there's a purchase order here, CT. You could link it to that particular purchase order. And again, you've got the ability to authorize or reject it. If you do try and reject it, InTime prompts you to give a reason. So for example, you'd have to start the process again. So if you're going to reject, you could say something like, did not work Monday, for example. Did not work Monday. If you were to reject that, that would then start the process again. So your contractor would get a notification to say it's been rejected for this particular reason, and obviously the process would have to start again. So once, obviously, a timesheet has been accepted, and it'd then be ready to create an invoice off the back of it. So these ones here, that's showing you exactly what's been approved. And obviously we rejected the one just a moment ago, but we've got a few others that I've already added kind of in there. And at this stage, you can raise a sales invoice for your particular contractor. So you can see exactly what's in there, for example. It's obviously really strong. So sales invoice. And yeah, you can get a clear breakdown. So this particular invoice here, if you were to preview it, this is exactly what it would look like for a client when they receive this. They would have a complete breakdown of everything that's gone on within that particular placement. So within InTime, you get the timesheets embedded to the invoice. So the client has a really, really clear understanding of what's going on. Obviously, there wouldn't be any RSM branding. This is completely customizable. Once you at agency level are happy that everything's in order, you've got the ability to select all, or perhaps you only want to raise an invoice for this particular worker, for example. But once you do generate, you get prompted, are you sure? And then you can see the exact status. So once the invoice has been produced, you've got the ability to view it, you've got the progress, and if it did fail, obviously you'd get a 0 and a red kind of mark. So these are all invoices that have been raised historically. From this point, it would obviously be ready in your sales invoices. So anything that you wanted to send, for example, could sit in here. And this is another really important tool to mention. InTime Core has got a really strong filtering tool that's present in all kind of profiles and portals, whereby you can drill down into any information you want, i.e. client, worker, consultant, manager, or provider. You can look for invoices on date range, references, or financials. So for example, if you had an agency that was working in perhaps, they might have a London office, they might have a Manchester office, you can drill down. Of course, location is also the same, and division, whatever it was that you're looking for. But with regard to the invoices, at this stage, for example, if we were to look at an invoice like we've just done, once you're ready to send it, you've got the ability to download it or edit it. So for example, you might want to change who the recipient is. So for example, if it was going to perhaps a different person, a different division, a different address, or perhaps the finance director had to change roles perhaps and might not actually be at the company, you've got the ability to change all of these, as well as add custom text or an internal comment, for example. And likewise with the paper timesheets, you can upload any kind of supplementary evidence with that invoice before you send it off to client. Once you're happy, obviously all that's left to do is to send the invoices to your particular clients, which, yeah, of course, would obviously go to them. You've also got a few manual override options, so you can mark them as sent, not paid, mark exported or not exported. But they're really quite specific situations that you'd find yourselves in, which is fine. In terms of, I think we mentioned it earlier, if you were to export a sales invoice, typically this is done via a CSV file before it goes into Xero or Sage, and all you'd have to do is CSV file, and InTime will generate that for you. So this might not be particularly attractive because it is just a demo environment, but this is the kind of information that you'd upload into Xero or Sage, for example, and Sage would obviously read this and process it in obviously your finance packages. To look at perhaps the reporting element. So InTime has got a really, really strong reporting module. So if you were to look at, you can basically drill down into anything. For example, if I was to go margin report and just do a really, really high level kind of gross margin, any information that's in InTime is completely available, so and can be edited. So for example, this will show up absolutely everything that's going on in the system, and of course you can configure this to your own parameters. So you can have this color coordinated. You could perhaps search by consultant. You could perhaps search by placement. You could work out who your most profitable client is, your least profitable client, what consultant is performing particularly well, which consultant perhaps is not performing well, and that could be an area for review perhaps. Yeah, completely configurable. So obviously this is a lot of information. You can obviously save specific reports if you so wanted to. Really strong, and yeah.